Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes. We'll wait for a couple more people to log on. Thank you for joining us today.
To the person who has asked, yes, if you're a participant, you should be muted. Well, hello, my name is Daniel Schoonmaker. I'm the Executive Director of West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our event today, our February forum on modern day sustainable solar development. For those that are not familiar with the organization, West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum is a collaboration of businesses and institutions dedicated to promoting sustainable business practices that advance climate leadership, social justice, and the creation of a circular economy. Please keep an eye out for our upcoming events with a to be determined dates. Our March speaker, which we expected to be on the second Monday of the month, but still being confirmed, is John Elkington, founder and chief pollinator of Volans, and one of the founders of the global sustainability movement. John is an experienced advisor to business, a thought leader in sustainable development. Please keep an eye out for our newsletter and event emails, and take a look at other upcoming events on our website as well. Videos of today's program and the prior sessions are available on demand at no cost on West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum's YouTube channel. After this event, you will also receive an email with a link to today's event with a feedback survey and any additional notes that come out of the program. All of the forum programs are primarily funded through membership donations. If you're not yet a member organization, I encourage you to become one. There has never been a better time to do so, or really a greater need. A link to more information about our membership can be found in the chat shortly. To that effect, I'd like to recognize our new corporate members: Graphic Packaging International, SIPSI, Outdoor Discovery Center, Furthered, Pure Architects, and Fruit Belt Incorporated. Following this event, we're happy to welcome you to a virtual networking session, a separate breakout room to meet more of our members. The link will be posted in the chat shortly, as well as at the end of the event. You may also be interested in learning about our various working groups, including those with upcoming meetings this month, such as our Solid Waste Task Force and our regional programs on the Lakeshore and Southwest Michigan, which may be of interest to some of you tuning in today. Email us to get involved with any of our working groups. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists for our program today. Tyler Kanczuzewski. Tyler, I can say that normally, but when I actually write it in front of me phonetically, it messes me up. Vice President of Marketing Sustainability for Inovateus Solar, and John Kinch, Executive Director of Michigan Energy Options. Thank you both for joining us today. For our attendees, please note that you can share thoughts with the panelists or all attendees through the chat function. You can also ask questions to the Q&A field if you prefer, and we will likely prioritize those. We should have ample time at the end of the presentations today for open questions and answers. Tyler and John will be speaking to us about the evolving role of solar power in sustainable business, focusing on co-benefits and development considerations, and we're really looking forward to learning from their experience. Tyler, the screen is yours as if you'd like to start us off here.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Dan and Rose, thanks for having me. Honored to be here. John, good to see you. Good to be doing this presentation with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I do have some slides. Let's see. Got to move this box. All right, everybody can see that.
Looks good, Tyler.
Awesome. Well, good deal. My name is Tyler Kanczuzewski. I am currently, let's see, here we go. Currently the Vice President of Sustainability and Marketing at Inovateus Solar. And I have my Inovateus Solar hat on today. I'm also Sustainability Manager at Logistic. And I attended Grand Valley State, started in 2016 and finished my MBA program in 2019 and spent a lot of time in Grand Rapids. And I was actually the only person doing or emphasizing in sustainability at that time. And I worked quite heavily and engaged with Norm Christopher, who was the sustainability director at Grand Valley State at that time, and engaged with his group throughout my study. So that was really impactful. And Norm's really the one that encouraged me to join this group, which I joined in, I believe, 2017 officially. So thanks, Norm, for getting me involved with this group. So it's an honor to now fast forward and be able to speak to the group. So I work at Inovateus Solar. We're in South Bend, Indiana. So we're actually literally on State Line Road. There's a bar across the street from us that's in Michigan. So whenever we close a big deal or anything like that, we can go across the street and have a drink. But we officially started in 2008, which was really before the solar boom. You know, things were just starting to take off. And our mission is building a brilliant tomorrow. So really, we got into solar because of our sustainability inspiration and wanting to make the world a better place. And it really took us on a journey to have solar and sustainability align and bring together communities, educate people, learn how to live more in balance with nature and minimize our environmental footprint. And now that we've been in solar for 13 years, we've realized that the industry has grown rather fast, and there's things that we can do better. Technology is always changing, so we have to continually evolve and learn and do better. Solar panel efficiencies have gone up like 50%. They used to, when we started in 2008, a 200 watt panel was a big panel, but now there's 600 watt. So even more than 50% growth in solar panel efficiency. So technology is changing, and solar's having more of an impact the way we do things. Some of these charts you've probably seen before, but I just wanted to quickly review them and show how coal production and renewables are getting very close in terms of our total generation. And we know that coal is our biggest greenhouse gas emitter, and solar, the graph on the left, is substantially less. Another interesting thing, the chart on the right shows the price of solar has gone from over $100 a watt in 1975 to 60 cents a watt in 2015, and now it's even cheaper. And you see this curve, installations from 2000 to 2015 have just been very rampant. So we've seen crazy growth, and SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association, they're the biggest educator And they also fight for many of our good policies in the solar association or the solar industry. But from 2020 to 25, we're going to see big growth, especially in utility solar and as well as residential and commercial. And we're really seeing this whole decade to be continue to grow and be bigger than the last 10 years. So we're really right in the midst of a solar boom. So over the last few years, that's really pushed Inovateus to try to be more of an industry educator and promoter to do solar more sustainably. And that's what I'm here to talk about. What is modern day sustainable solar development, and what are some things that we're doing right now to change our model as well as encourage others to do a better job. So the first one is optimal system design. So this is an IKEA building we did, I believe, in 2012. You see, we put a lot of solar on that building, and we tried to pack in as much power as we could. And that's become one of our missions, to really take a square footprint of a building or of land and put more power in per square foot, and really try to use less space, but produce more power so that we have less of an environmental impact. And especially if you're working with the land, let's say we worked with IKEA here, you see some farm fields to the north. Let's say they own that property and they were deciding, should we put solar here on our building? So if we were going to do on the land there, we'd want to have a minimal impact and not take any trees down, or have healthy soil, so if the solar is decommissioned and taken out, they could turn it back to farmland or whatever they want to do. So optimal system design is really how we lead, and it's the first step. And when we're looking at solar construction, the number 2 is pollinator habitats, and this is really for our ground mounts. And this is something that's really grown the last several years, and it's very common now when you're talking solar ground mounts to do pollinating habitat, which is good for bees and butterflies. And as we know, the bee and butterfly populations are drastically declining. So it's really interesting to see how pollinating habitat has come about with solar, and to really tell a cool story of merging together wildlife habitat with renewable energy. And there's a lot of old farms now that are being converted to solar, and they're starting to do these pollinator habitats. And you might hear the term agrovoltaics being thrown around, but it's a cool new term, because it's basically instead of the old traditional farming corn or soybeans, you can farm renewable energy and also put in a native habitat that's good for bees, butterflies, pollinated insects, and other wildlife. And sheep grazing is becoming more and more common too, to send sheep in for grazing instead of mowing. Interesting studies are coming out that pollinating habitat, as you see in this picture, the roots grow much deeper than traditional turf grass, which is shown on the left. And because of that, the pollinating habitat can sequester more carbon, quite a bit more than turf grass. So now you can start talking about solar, and putting in this habitat can be a carbon sink. And also, it's better for stormwater management. You're reducing the maintenance of your solar facility because you don't have to mow as much, you don't have to spray as much chemical. So there's just a great story here, and we're really trying to push this in the industry. And one thing we have to encourage is minimum panel height, because the pollinator habitat grows taller than turf grass. We're trying to get the industry and work with NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, to get solar panels off the ground higher, and recommend it as an industry practice to get them off the ground a little bit higher, which doesn't add much installation cost or material cost. and it promotes a better environment for the native habitat. This is one that hits home with me. Our third big initiative is zero construction waste. So you see the picture on the right, the solar panels, and this is just like 60 panels. So you're talking sites, thousands and thousands or more of these pallets. So there's wood pallets, there's cardboard, there's banding, and there's shrink wrap, and it's all being sent to a job site to be able to construct the solar. And you also have racking equipment that comes in special types of pallets, inverters, again, different types of pallets. So we're dealing with a lot of wood, cardboard, various plastics, metal, and even contractor waste. From the mechanical and electrical standpoint, there's wire, there's conduit, some miscellaneous debris. So we're really trying to go above and beyond to sort and separate all this on site and recycle it. And surprisingly, we're finding out that it's not too difficult. And unfortunately, a lot of the industry is not doing this. So we're trying to push the envelope a little bit to encourage all to push for zero waste construction. And that's pretty hard to do, to go 100% recycled. But this is something that we've found out, especially in the last year, that it's possible. You got to go above and beyond in terms of reaching out to local companies that can help you. So if we're working in Illinois or Ohio, we're going to have to call on a lot of local support, maybe to that city or to that region. Also shipping, a lot of equipment is still shipped internationally. So, we try to get American made when we can to reduce shipping, but if equipment is being shipped from Asia or Europe, we're looking at, the most ultra low carbon shipping options, because shipping definitely is a greenhouse gas emitter, globally speaking. And then the last one is end of life and decommissioning of the array. So what do you do in 25 years when this equipment degrades down, especially the silicon in the solar panels? Once they're being hit by the sun for 25 plus years, they start losing their efficiency. Now, there are solar systems that are about 30 to 35 years old out in the marketplace that are still producing 75% of the original output. So you don't necessarily at 25 years have to decommission a solar array, but roughly, around that 25-year mark, what do you decide to do? Well, if you want to recycle, there's huge growth in the recycling industry. So we're confident that we'll be able to handle all the solar panels that are decommissioned. I put at the bottom here a link to SIA. They have a PV recycling program where they kind of give you all the companies that are in solar panel recycling. And also there's an association called PV Cycle. It's the logo on the top right, and they're a group that's getting really heavily involved with the initiative, especially on the solar panels. So and this kind of hits on the idea of upcycle and creating a next life, so that we can recycle all the solar equipment so that it can go on and have a second life. So that's been something we've been working on. It's been pretty exciting. And the bottom left picture is actually damaged panels. So if we're in construction and a car goes off a highway and hits some panels, or a tornado comes through, or a contractor breaks a panel, there's companies we're working with right now that can recycle the panels and get the value out of them. Cascade Eco Minerals is one of those companies. And then another big initiative is sharing the knowledge. So when we're working in communities, we really want to engage with schools, with the city, and try to promote engagement and education and really bringing peace and prosperity to all, because this industry is changing fast, and we're in the midst of a solar boom, and it's important that we share with students and with cities, how great, solar can be in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, how it can promote jobs. I think the solar industry is at maybe 250,000 plus jobs now, and it's only going to continue to grow. So there's going to be a lot of future opportunities for kids to get into solar and renewables in general, because the growth in renewables is quite spectacular the last 10 years and going to continue to grow. So that brings me to a close on my slides, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the end when John's done speaking. But yeah, again, excited to be here and speak with John, and please ask some questions in the end.
Great. Let's. I think we got one quick question I want to throw your way. What height do you want solar panels to be to work best with pollinator fields?
I'd say 30 inches minimum. 36 inches is what NREL's trying to put out, and we agree with that. 36 inches is very doable, and it actually doesn't add much cost at all to your solar installation and the material use. We've worked with a lot of our racking companies and studying this, and the pricing is coming out a little bit, just a touch more than if you were to install at 24 inches, which is the more common height of the past. 24 inches is what you saw normally in the past. So I think more and more we're going to see 36 inches being the new standard.
Great. And John, we're gonna turn it over to you at this point.
Excellent. Can everybody see my screen?
You're good to go.
Nod your head. So, hey, Tyler, I figured there's no degrees of separation between us. Norman Christopher is a good friend of mine, so I was pleased to hear you say that. My presentation is going to repeat a bit because of what Tyler talked about, which is good because I hope to underscore some of his points about how you do solar in such a way that there are a number of multipliers to the project that are economic, social, and environmental. So I want to just put out there that I hope my presentation touches on a few best practices and principles, and I'm going to put them out front now, just in case by the time I get to the end of it, I whiff and you don't hear them or don't buy them. So one of those is going to be the local multipliers is key to this. We need to have our public institutions, if not leading, at least walking the walk. And I've got a good example of a public entity doing this. Marginal lands first, this idea that we're maximizing our roof space in our parking lots, in our brownfields for our solar development. We need good enabling policy for solar in the state. We've got some good laws on the books, but we could use others. And then lastly, communities really need to ask for solar. You need to cajole, you need to advocate for it. And I've got a story about my reaching out to a community to bring community solar to them. And I'll tell you that at the end. Real quick, Michigan Energy Options, for those of you who don't know us, we're a clean energy nonprofit. We've been around 40 plus years, offices, Grand Rapids, East Lansing, and Marquette. We do a lot of energy efficiency work, programs and projects of various kinds. And in the last few years, we've been very active in solar projects. And that's what I'm going to talk to you folks about here this afternoon. This is our East Lansing Community Solar Park. We brought this online first of 2019. We're fortunate to be the Energy Project of the Year from the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council. We're locating this at a site in East Lansing called Bircham Park, and it is indeed part of the recreation and park system at East Lansing. It's also a capped landfill. And when we were beginning to develop the ideas for community solar, we quickly decided that we wanted to first and foremost locate solar on a landfill that's really of no potential for reuse in the future. Moreover, we also wanted to make sure that we did some things on this site that enhanced the site from what it currently is. And to backspace real quickly, for those of you who may not know exactly what community solar is, think of it this way. It's kind of when the market fails in that you can't locate solar on somebody's rooftop for various reasons, whether it's residential or commercial. Many reasons, because it's not facing the right direction. It might not have the integrity it needs, but a big one is that many of us rent. We rent where we live and we rent where we work. And so solar on the rooftop or on site isn't necessarily possible. Community solar, what it does when it's doing it right, locates solar somewhere in the community that isn't going to become a land use issue. And then you set it up so that people can lease into the project, own a certain amount of it, lease a certain amount of it, and then they can get an on-bill credit from the utility for their portion that they are supporting. So because this is a capped landfill, you'll notice on the right-hand side that the racking is not pounded into the ground, which is pretty typical of the industry. The graphic or the photo that Tyler has behind him is showing that kind of an installation. Instead, we had to locate these in concrete ballast because it needs to sit on top of the cap and not do any damage to the cap itself, because obviously there's methane and such beneath the ground. We also made a point for our site is to include habitat restoration. Tyler did a really nice job of speaking about the benefits of pollinators. I won't go into that. You can see there we have milkweed in the corner that's growing at our site. So we are in about the second year in that process of making sure that the native species are going to take over and grow and become habitat and food for birds and insects. Also at the location, we're only using about 2 acres out of a 24-acre site. And so people who do use that site, they can still walk around and do their kind of recreating, and the deer are still enjoying the habitat that's been left to them. I very much hope the deer stay on their side of the fence and not on our side of the fence. It can be a problem once they get inside of a community or any kind of a solar project. In addition to community solar projects we've done around the state, East Lansing, we've helped out on a project in Lawrence, and we also were instrumental in getting the project at Marquette going. We've been working with the state of Michigan DNR and helping that agency bring online solar. And on your left-hand side, there is an example of a recent project that we brought online at a fish hatchery up north. That solar is providing most, if not all, of the energy needs for that visitor center at the fish hatchery. And what's nice about the location of the solar panels to the hatchery is that it's going to be an educational opportunity for the DNR. There'll be signage both inside and outside explaining why the DNR is going solar. So they're an example of an agency, not just walking the walk, but really leading. They are the first agency in the state of Michigan to really go big with solar. And one of the reasons they're doing this is because of their mission. Obviously, their mission is protect our natural assets, to steward places that we enjoy to recreate, and climate change is a threat to that. And they get it, and they understand that. The DNR owns a lot of property. They have something like 4 million acres in play. I think that's the number. It's significant. They also have some properties that really are of marginal usage, including some legacy mining sites. These sites, we have two, one is in UP, one's in the Lower Peninsula, that we recently had a land lease opportunity and a solar company won the rights to develop these projects into something more like a utility scale project. The one you're looking at there is the one in the Upper Peninsula, Groveland Mine. And what's good about utilizing old mining sites or old industrial sites, and Tyler will know this, is that there's also utility infrastructure at these places, because at one point they needed to have electricity. So now instead of a site that's going to be a consumer of electricity, these are sites that are going to be one day, knock on wood, generators of electricity. In addition to the fish hatchery I mentioned and some of these larger sites that the DNR has, we're taking a regional approach right now to develop solar at a number of their properties around the state that include state parks, recreation areas, fish hatcheries, headquarters, various other kinds of sites. You can see there on the left that what we've done is identified the sites the DNR has, and we've broken them up by region. And on the right is a more of a close view of the Southwest Michigan portfolio, as we're calling it. And we've broken this up as regions for a reason, because we want solar developers, installers to be able to bid on these projects as a group. And by bidding on these projects as a group, because some of them are relatively small, they're kind of rooftop size, or perhaps, you know, a little bit smaller than a community solar project, but bigger than you would typically put on your house, you know, 10, 20, 50, 100, 150 kilowatts. We believe by locating these together like this, that there can be some economies of scale, that the solar developer can then have less distance between projects, and also they can do things such as buy in bulk. So they're in their procurement process, they can buy a bunch of panels and inverters and all the equipment they need, and thus it lowers the cost for the solar developer. In this case, the business model is going to be that the state of Michigan DNR enters into a power purchase agreement with these solar developers. They'll in effect own the asset, they'll own and operate the solar, but the DNR will pay a certain percentage of their utility bill every month to the solar developer instead of sending it to the utility company. Here's a little bit zooming in even further of a project at Fort Custer, which is just south of us here in Grand Rapids. We've identified 3 sites there, as well as we're beginning to map out for these solar developers where we think solar should be located and why. What we're doing as the owner's representative or the consultant for the DNR is doing as much of de-risking of these projects as we can. We're in fact trying to do some of the due diligence that solar companies typically do themselves. And the reason of this is that, as Tyler mentioned, solar is booming right now, and it's a competitive market, and solar companies are busy. And we want to make sure that they're going to pay attention to us. So we're thinking that if we can lower the threshold for the work they have to do to make a good assessment of a project and then bid into the project, all the better. Moreover, what we intend to do, because my team is trained up, we have solar engineers, we have all kinds of technical folks. You know, we hope to work very closely with those solar developers in making sure that the project goes forward. Too often, and Tyler knows this, projects get going and they don't come to fruition. Something falls apart in the process. And our feeling is, given the urgency of climate change and given the desire of DNR to have these projects happen, we want to make sure we're doing everything to make sure that there's a marriage between what the DNR wants and what solar companies can bring. We've worked in the municipal space quite a bit and continue to do so. A couple of years ago, with our good partners, Elevate Energy, On Point, and others in the Detroit area, we brought online a comprehensive program for the city of Detroit where we analyzed any number of opportunities for the city to locate solar. We provided them a solar feasibility map. We did some analysis of buildings. We provided them any number of tools that they can then utilize so that they can get more into the solar game. I think we're going to see some movement there real soon. We're pretty encouraged about it. It was a really interesting exercise for us all, and it really showed, I think, the very value of bringing in expert nonprofits to work with municipalities on issues around solar. And the reason is that it's not as straightforward as you might think. This is the East Lansing Department of Public Works. What you're looking at there is a recent solar assessment we've provided them. You can see that their rooftops are pretty good candidates for solar, behind the meter, if you will, as well as potential for putting some more solar panels in that field there where they could perhaps sell that electricity on the grid to the utility. And what's interesting about DPWs in general is that they have a lot of load. They oftentimes have demand charges. They have issues around needing to shave peak. They have all these kinds of things that are going on there. So solar in and of itself is a good solution, but it's probably not the only solution they're going to need. So we're also working to integrate what a battery might do for them, some sort of storage by shifting their load to a different time of the day or shaving their demand as well. And it gets to be pretty technical to analyze this stuff. And no offense to all the bright people who work in cities, but some of this is pretty intense. And if you're not doing it every day, it's not necessarily easy to understand or to model. And the last point to make about DPWs or cities in general, many cities like Grand Rapids and others, East Lansing, they have ambitions to have a fleet that goes EV at some point. And so all the city buses and the trucks and the dump trucks and all those other kinds of vehicles that become EVs that need to be charged up, how's that going to work? And where are you going to locate it? And are you going to be pulling on renewable energy for that resource, or are you just going to be actually increasing your load in which fossil fuels are providing for those electric vehicles? These are important things to be thinking about now and working on, and that's what we're trying to solve for the DPW in East Lansing and others. Back to brownfields real quick here. The UP, we did a study a few years ago. We looked at some 50 legacy mining and industrial sites and found any number of good candidates to locate solar there because they have utility infrastructure on site. They've got a number of acres that can be put into play. And oftentimes, ownership of these sites has fallen on the township or the city because that business went out of business 50 years ago. So you're sitting there with a liability which could be potentially be turned into an asset. These projects have land lease revenue available to a city, and they also have various kinds of taxes available to a city. So cities should really be thinking about the brownfields in a way that is such where you could perhaps put them out there, get some analysis done, and have them become renewable energy generators for your city, both economically and also in terms of providing you resiliency and local electricity. Which brings me to my last slide, and that's Butterworth. Some of you on this webinar probably know of Butterworth a little bit. This is a site in Grand Rapids that some years ago was put up for bid for a solar development. A company won the bid, and there was some time that passed, and then the company stepped away from the project. I think it's fair to say there's still those of us in the industry who are interested in thinking about Butterworth as a potential location for solar. Why? Well, it's not only a brownfield, it's a Superfund site. So it's a site that is not going to be redeveloped into anything else anytime soon. Solar could sit on top of that cap, if you will, and not do any damage to it. There's a substation nearby that you could plug into. And what I'd like to see is a kind of community solar or community engagement piece of this. We're right along a bike and footpath, so you could conceivably set up a little bit of education kiosk as well as a platform there. People could go by, walk up those stairs, get out their smartphone, look at an app and see those panels that they are leasing in this project and really get their head around the benefits of, again, taking something which is a liability in a community and turning it into an asset. That said, what we don't have in Michigan, which we need and other states have, is what is kind of thought of as enabling legislation for community solar. A number of states such as Minnesota and Illinois have community solar carve-outs. So what this means is that there's legislation there requiring utilities to do something which is very specific to community solar. And that's different than utility, it's different than behind the meter, it's different than C&I, it's different than residential. And it is the hope of many of us that there's a bill that's been drafted and is around that it would see the light of day, and perhaps in 2021 we would get some kind of legislation that might make something like Butterworth much more feasible and able to do that. And my last point is just that community solar is about communities, or any of this what I just was talking about. And people need to be vociferous about it. You need to let your elected officials and the people who represent you know that you want to see this, you're interested in this, and you need to talk to your local utility, especially if your utility is a municipality or cooperative, which means they are much more ideally tuned into what the local community wants to see for their future. So with that, I will stop, and Dan, I guess we're going to do questions unless you have another related announcement.
Now let's start for questions, and I think we may have to discuss a few other things as we get underway a bit here. We've got a good number in already, but I've got one that came in via email over the weekend that I'm a little curious about, and it was a manufacturer that was addressing concerns, and he put this in. And originally, they went to the point of talking about net metering and the issues related to that. I think we could talk about at length. But I was kind of curious with it because he highlighted a scenario in which he'd like to put solar power on his facility, runs 3 shifts, 5 days a week, and has and has concerns and highlighted this as part of a a net metering argument. That's they're not going to be operating 2 days a week, and as such, and from a certain perspective, the utility is almost stealing from him if he's not able to use that. So I was curious, without uh, if relief wasn't able to come from net metering, are there things that a manufacturer or another large facility operator could be thinking of if they're down for a large portion of the day or the week and not using that draw of energy?
Tyler, go ahead.
John, do you have any thoughts that come to mind first, or?
Well, I mean, the big one is storage, of course, right? I mean, the cost curve for storage, I think many of us were pleasantly surprised to see the cost curve for solar drop so precipitously, so quickly. And I think we're also surprised to see the same happening with storage. So it's becoming a lot more affordable. And I think, speaking just sort of generally, like not in particular about Grand Rapids or our utilities, but just sort of nationally, storage is seen as a way, if you're doing a behind the meter project and it's not necessarily advantageous to you to have electrons spilling over onto the grid, storage is seen as a way to keep those electrons on your side. And so depending on the analysis, Dan, and you'd have to really do the analysis, you might be able to theoretically have a storage solution that when you're not up and running on that weekend, it's just packing those electrons away for Monday morning.
That was well said. Yeah.
Anything to add there, Tyler?
That's exactly it. I mean, just add to storage. The technology and pricing's come a long way, so it's affordable to look at adding storage in all solar projects, really, and especially for these situations, where you have different demands and a schedule you got to work with.
So start running through some of our questions today, and I think you can both see them, and I'm just going to kind of go in order here. What practices are being used to manage pollinator fields? Typical native grasses and plants grow much taller than 3 feet. Controlled burn is common practice. Have the dangers of fire been considered? Probably 2 questions there.
I used to work at the Nature Conservancy, and I always enjoyed when we had prescribed burns. You go out to somewhere and set it on fire. That's not going to happen with the solar field. It's just not going to happen. Not a good idea. And the truth is that some pollinators grow quite tall, but there's a seed mix you can get that are various heights, so that you can actually manage the crop, if you will, that you're growing, so that you don't necessarily run into those issues of having it, unintentionally kind of covering up a solar panel producing electricity. That said, it's a relatively labor-intensive project at first. We have a wildflower company working for us right now that has to go out and you chop things down real closely, you do some weeding, and then you kind of keep doing that until those non-natives get exhausted and you're able to have the natives take over and dominate. What would you say, Tyler?
Yeah, I'd agree, and it definitely depends on where you're at in the Midwest in terms of pollinator habitat. At least Inovateus, we're working projects across the Midwest, but when you're talking Michigan, it's probably going to be a lot of the same pollinator mixes. But yeah, you put together a maintenance schedule, and I'd say what's the first 3 years are critical, John, and you get rid of your invasives, but then after 3 years, you might not have to mow it or do much spraying at all, right? You can pretty much minimize your maintenance.
We intend to do none of that after a few years. We just want to let it run its course.
Yep. And yeah, a lot of the habitats in solar are newer, so people are still learning how to, do things the best. But there's plenty of farms, I think, that have been out there for 10 years and well-established habitats that are, maintain minimal maintenance throughout the year.
The John, I think this one's for you. How far can a community solar site be from the end user?
Well, so community solar is a term of art, if you will, that has different definitions. And there's not agreement in the industry as to what constitutes a community solar project. Some community solar projects can have great distance between where they're located and those participating customers. Others ideally want to be in nearer to where their customers are. I think for the most part, the feeling is that a community solar project has to be within the service territory of a utility for all kinds of legal reasons, if you will. We tend to think of community solar as best deployed where you have those marginal land situations somewhere in proximate to that community that it's serving, that are participating in that project. But there's not universal agreement on this.
And I think I'm going to might need some clarification from the asker on this one. But Stacy has asked, can you please provide information on whether it is important for the solar panels to be installed contiguous to each other? What happens if they're broken out into 2 or 3 groups of panels on the same site? I'd imagine it's just not as great a utilization of space, right?
So the ask is if they're installed side by side in different sections.
I think the ask would be if maybe we'll circle back on that, Stacy, if you wouldn't mind just clarifying your thoughts on the your thoughts in the chat. John, I think this one probably starts with you. What sort of constraints do you have regarding plantings on brownfield sites, especially capped landfills? E.g., was root depth an issue?
Right, that's a good question. In fact, Tyler's graphic that shows the fact that many native species are deep rooting is a good one, and he's right, absolutely right. They're better for the soil, they're better for a carbon sink, and all the rest. Because our cap at our site is anywhere from 2 to 4 feet in depth, we had to pick some native species that wouldn't necessarily be those that root 4 feet down. So we had to pick and choose what we could put there because of that reason. In our case, and not to go too deep into how landfills work, but the stand is that some have a clay cap, some have more of of a rubberized kind of cap. In the case of the one we're working with, it's a clay cap, and so we just wanted to make sure there would be not any situation where that would be penetrating into the clay.
Great. And I think Tyler, this one I think probably looks to you to begin, because you talked a little bit about this. On a normal job, how many panels are damaged to the point that they cannot be used and need to be recycled or otherwise disposed of?
Yeah, it depends on with the contractor. Sometimes we've realized that they're newer contractors and they have a little bit of a learning curve with the installation of the racking, mounting the panels to the racking. I'd say 1%, maybe something like that, as far as damage or some, there's some defect with the panel. We're finishing a job with the University of Illinois right now. Super exciting job in terms of all of these sustainability initiatives I'm talking about. They're doing tracking technology with NextTracker to increase the kilowatt hour production. They're bifacial panels. So another thing with optimal design is looking at now panels that can produce power from both sides, mainly from the top side, but also some additional from the bottom. So they have trackers, bifacials, they have smart inverters. We're doing zero waste construction there, which we actually achieved it. We partnered with the university. They helped us with a lot of the pallets, cardboard, and the various other things. And we collected all the shrink wrap and the plastic banding, because there's a company in Elkhart here, one county over. Elkhart's obviously pretty famous for RV industry, but it's Tri-Power Recycling, and they take a lot of interesting things like shrink wrap, banding. They do styrofoam, so they recycle some different things. Dan, that'd be a good group to introduce you to. They're starting to make some moves in recycling. But yeah, and then they're doing pollinated habitat at that site as well, and it's involved with the university. So in terms of education, the students have already been doing projects on it about the carbon footprint of the actual construction and to install solar. And so I think it'll be one of the more sustainable jobs in the country and really be a star for this modern sustainable solar development. But at that site, I think we have about a pallet of broken panels, about 30 or so panels out of, I don't know how many thousand we have there. I could probably get the numbers here shortly, but so yeah, not that horrible. But it does depend on the contractor.
Tyler, do you have any idea of what the retained value of 30 panels or so would be to a recycler?
Yeah, I mean so if we're looking at
would it be comparable to like 30 laptops? I think, I'm not sure if he's frozen out or if he's just being really thoughtful.
He's frozen.
Yeah.
Broke the internet, Dan.
I'm sure we'll see him again soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rose, if you could help Tyler out. John, while we're waiting on that, what's the typical cost differential between community solar and utility rates, save for the Lansing installation you mentioned?
So ask that again.
The typical cost differential between community solar and utility rates.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and if you're asking like for the end user, the customer's perspective, right?
I presume so.
Yeah, I mean, the math gets complicated. I guess what I would say is this, is that with our project in East Lansing, at least, people are leasing into the project with a 25-year contract, and we anticipate that about year 10 that they will have, by their energy savings per month from this project, will have kind of zeroed out their upfront capital cost to participate in it. And thus, from year 10 to the end of the contract, 15 more years, they'll basically be getting free electrons from the project. Does that make sense? That's one way to answer your question, I believe. So what I'm trying to say is like a community solar project is different than a power purchase agreement. So a power purchase agreement, let's say I'm a business or whatever, I'm the DNR or whatever, and I want to enter into a power purchase agreement with the solar developer and have a certain amount of my utility bills go to that solar developer versus go to the incumbent utility. By and large, what you're looking for from the solar, and solar can do this in many, many applications, is you're paying the same or even less than what you're paying the utility for those electrons. And if you're not paying less now, in the future, as utility costs go up, you hold steady with your price point with that power purchase agreement, so you'll be saving money sometime in the near future. That PPA is a different model than a community solar model, if you will.
Yeah, you mentioned PPAs. We have a question about sleeved PPAs, which I'll admit is a new term for me. I haven't heard that before. Do either of you have any thoughts on that? Its potential in Michigan?
Did they did they elaborate on what they mean by sleeved PPAs?
Walker, you still on?
My understanding is that I guess I've understood that as being like a third-party developer, and SPE becomes that entity that handles the
Says
handles the business deal between that customer and the utility. No.
yeah, the utility charges a handling fee for taking energy and sending it to user.
Yeah. That's about all I got. I'd like to know more about it. So if Walker wants to shout me up, I'd love to get a download of what that's all about, and if it's feasible at all in Michigan.
Tyler, anything to add there?
I think that's pretty close to what I would have said. John said it well. And sorry about my laptop. For the first time ever, it did an emergency shut off because of the temperature. It said was too high. So I guess our conversation was running hot.
Yeah.
Well, glad to have you back. We only have room for another question or two here. If we were to aggregate some of these and send them along to you for kind of further thoughts, would you be willing to take a look at them, John and Tyler, offline?
Absolutely. I learn more from the questions that I'm asked than the answers that I have. You bet.
A number of them I can knock off in a row here. Well, actually, I'm going to go back to one. Assuming a small solar field is facing south, what is the rule of thumb for how far away from a woodland it needs to be?
Depends on how tall the trees are.
Yeah. It depends on how tall the trees are, because that's the same thing we deal with in cities with buildings that might cast a shadow on. So it's a good question, but I'd say there's not necessarily a rule of thumb, because if it's a short tree, you could install solar right next to it. I mean, hypothetically speaking.
Well, yeah, but if it's a young forest, so to speak, and you put it too close to that forest, in 10 years, you might have a problem, right?
Yep.
With shade.
That too.
Are you guys? Are you doing many trackers, the east-west trackers, in your installations?
Yeah. More and more of the east-west trackers. It looks like the question was, they were stated 50 to 60 feet. So I mean, if you're 50 to 60 foot tree,
It's tall.
that's a tall tree. I mean, I'd say 50 yards, probably something like that, John.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess like you said, it depends on what type of tree. Is it going to grow another 50 feet? So, and when I cut out earlier, the University of Illinois project we're finishing right now is 12.1 megawatts, and it's about 28,000 panels, and they're 400 watt bifacials. And I think we actually have like 2 pallets of broken panels. So out of 28,000 panels, there's like 60 damaged panels, and each panel is, let's say, a couple $100 a piece. It depends on how damaged the panel is. I mean, if it's really damaged, I mean, it loses most of its value. But if it's only partly damaged, I mean, you can get probably about half of its value back per panel. The biggest initiative in the industry is don't send any solar panels to the landfill, and because there is value. If you got a good number of them, you can break them apart and find some value there. So that's the biggest initiative, is make sure you're recycling everything you can.
All right, so we've got a number of questions here, and we're gonna commit to aggregating those and forwarding along to John and Tyler, and see if they can shed some additional light on some of these questions. A number of them about the enabling legislation for community solar, some on battery systems, and others on disposal costs. As we wrap up here, I want to highlight that we we are going to open this up to a networking portion of the event. If you'd like to join that, the link has been posted in the chat, and you will see that again here, I believe. So just go ahead and click that as soon as we wrap up. Before we break, I do want to thank John and Tyler again, and I got another quick announcement for those with an interest, and we'll be sending out some communications on this later this afternoon as well. Especially if you're in the Lakeshore area, I want to make you aware that tomorrow night, the Grand Haven Township Zoning Board of Appeals will be reviewing the City of Grand Rapids request for a variance to install a 1 megawatt ground-mounted solar array on the 3.5 acre sites at the Lake Michigan filtration plant. The city is partnering with ES Services, with subsidiary Consumers Energy, and it has been approved by the city of GR for a fairly significant expenditure in this to provide up approximately $1.2 million in net savings over a 24-year period for the city. While reducing 1,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. The Zoning Board of Appeals is going to be the deciding factor on that. They have the authority to either approve or deny the variance tomorrow. If you're curious, it's 100% behind the meter, so no electricity is going to be going to the consumer's grid as a result of that. If you're in the Grand Haven area, it'd be wonderful if you could provide some comments either in advance or at the meeting tomorrow night. And if you're not and are just a general supporter of solar energy, we encourage you to do so as well. And look for some additional information from our organization coming out on that. Also, as a reminder, we will be sending out the presentations from both John and Tyler. And again, John, Tyler, thank you for your time today. It was fantastic. I think we probably could have talked about it for another hour, but I'm not going to force you to do that. We've got a networking hour to go to. So if you would like to join us in there, please do. And John and Tyler, we owe you both a beer whenever we're allowed to get together again in person, which I'm hopeful will be sometime this springish.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Rose.
Thanks. Yeah, look forward to it.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, John.
Pleasure.
So thank you, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in the networking room. Failing that, I hope to see you back here in March.
See you.